Hello everyone, Sula here, host of Sula's Big Adventures. In this episode, I'm going to be making a star trail picture. I've been noticing this beautiful set of aspens behind me and I thought, that would make a nice foreground for a star trail picture. Let me go back there and see where Polaris is with respect to the stand of aspens. So I have my app Stellarium, and it looks like that Polaris will be directly over the aspens. And the reason that's important for a star trail is that if you get Polaris in the center of the frame, you'll have nice concentric circles. Whereas if you're pointed to other parts of the sky, you'll only have part of the circle when you make your star trails. And so it looks like it's going to work out pretty well. So I'm going to use a 14mm lens on a full frame camera. The 500 rule says I could shoot up to 35 seconds, but some people say on a full frame camera you should divide by 300, but either way, I'm trying to make star trails, so it doesn't matter that much, I think. But I'm going to set it to 25-second shutter speed, and I'll take probably 600 pictures. I have an internal intervalometer, and I can just set it to take consecutive pictures 1 second apart, all the way up to 900, or the battery dies. And so I think it's going to turn out pretty well. The only thing is I had to traipse about 100 yards maybe from the road, and there are animals back here, and I have to avoid that drainage in the dark. So hopefully I won't get wet or hear animals, or a deer or an elk, I hope, doesn't knock my tripod over, because I am going to leave it here because it'll take about 2 hours to do that. But after I finish, I'll let you know how it turns out. Well, before I leave and wait for it to get dark, I'm trying to frame up my shot now, because after it gets dark, you can't tell what is an aspen or colorful. So it's best to frame up the picture during the day when you can see the aspens or whatever your foreground is. And it looks like I cannot cut out that big tall Douglas fir that's off to the left hand side. 14mm is a very wide angle lens, but I want it wide so that I get as much of the circle as possible. So I'll have to have the Douglas fir in my aspens and star trails picture. And I wanted to tell you another thing, that when you do this, when you take a bunch of pictures like this, you can make two things. You can make a star trail picture by stacking the 600 frames, or you can take the 600 pictures and you can make it into a time lapse, because this will be pointed towards the other end of the Milky Way, and as Cassiopeia starts rotating around Polaris, it'll be with the tail end of the Milky Way. Not the core, but it can make a nice time lapse, so you get two different things with one set of pictures. One final piece of advice when you're making a star trail picture with the colorful foreground is that if you make your star trail picture when the moon is out, the moon will light up your foreground for you. Some people take a little LED light and shine it on the foreground. Or the third way you could do it is you could take a separate picture of the foreground and then blend that. I think that would be harder to do. I always just do it when there's a gibbous moon and let the moon light up the foreground. But watch out for trees behind you, because the first one I did, there were these eerie shadows on it when the moon moved behind those giant Douglas firs. So you got to not only look at your foreground, but see what's behind you and make sure that the moon is going to light it up the whole time you're taking the pictures. Or you can try the light method, but sometimes the light can look artificial and it doesn't look good. So the moon's probably better, but then you're not going to get a good time lapse because the stars will be washed out in each individual picture. Just a few more tips before you head out to make your star trails or your time lapses. Take bear spray if you're in an area that has animals, which you're probably not, but also let someone know where you're going to be. And finally, I'm sorry, I kept meaning to mention this and I kept forgetting, but you cannot use long exposure noise reduction for star trails or time lapses. In fact, my camera won't even let you if you use the camera's built-in intervalometer. So no long exposure noise reduction for star trails or for time lapses. But for astrophotography, yes. I've got this set up, by the way. This has nothing to do with star trails, but my telescope has been banging the tripod leg lately when I'm trying to look at something near the zenith, and so I tried to set the elevation limits and I couldn't get it to set the limits, so I disabled it. But if anyone can help me set the elevation limits on a Skywatcher EQ6R Pro, I would love to hear from you. Now I'll just quickly show you how to make star trails. Go into Adobe Bridge, open your folder where all your pictures are. I'll just go into the middle and pick one and open it in Adobe Camera Raw. And then we're going to do the same things that we did when we were making a time lapse. Go to the detail panel. Go to optics first and get rid of chromatic aberration. Use profile correction, close that, go to detail, increase the noise reduction to about 50, increase the masking to about 35, then go into the basic panel, and I need to recover some highlights because I had to redo this, and so there was no moon illuminating the aspens. There is a moon, but it came up really late, so I have to try to recover the shadows. And decrease the contrast. Let's see if I need to fix the white balance. Go to the eyedropper and click a neutral part of the sky. And then maybe increase the blacks a little bit. And I think that looks pretty good. So we'll just go with that. There's Andromeda. Okay, that looks pretty good. So then we just say done, and that'll send us back to Bridge, and then we want to go to develop settings, copy settings, then Control A, and then develop settings, paste settings, and then this is where it differs. Instead of loading these into Photoshop as layers, we're just going to go to Tools. We're going to go to Tools, Photoshop, Image Processor. Select a folder. I have a temporary folder, I can put them there. And we want to save them as TIFFs. You can save them as JPEGs. I'm going to save them as TIFFs. And then hit run. And it's going to take a while because there were 400 pictures, so I'll be back in a minute. We're going to open a free downloadable program called StarStax. And we're going to take that folder I made and drop the images there. So just Control A, drop the images there. There's all the TIFF files, and it's going to stack them. And for the blend mode, I choose gap filling, and then you hit this fourth button, which says, I think this is Start Processing. Now we want to save it, but we want to save it as .tiff. So it saves it as a TIFF. Open the TIFF. That JPEG was an accident. Yeah, here's the TIFF. So open the TIFF file. And then you just go to File, Export, Export As. Save it as a JPEG. Or whatever you want to, wherever you want to. And that's how you make a star trail photo with star stacks in Photoshop. This star trail was ruined by a car's headlamps, which shined into my scene. In this one, there was no discoloration, but the foreground was boring. And again, in this star trail, a car shined into the scene and discolored it. Then finally, third time's a charm. I was happy with this photo. So that's how you make star trails photos. It's pretty easy. And with the same set of photos, you can also make a time lapse. So you get 2 for 1. So that's the end of this episode on making star trails photos. I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, dark skies forever. Sula.